L'Eroica is a vintage bike ride that started in Tuscany in 1997 on the Strade Bianche, the white roads. It became so popular that there are Eroica events all over the world now, from South Africa to California to Japan, and since 2014, Britain too. To ride an Eroica event, what you need is a pre-1987 bike. It has to have downtube shifters, it has to have brake cables that loop over the handlebars, it has to have proper toe clips, no clipless pedals, and it has to have wheels with not less than 32 spokes. So clearly this bike is all about heroics rather than aerodynamics. For people of a certain age, L'Eroica is a great excuse to track down the bike that you always wanted when you were a kid, but it was too expensive and your parents wouldn't buy it for you. Or you can dress up like Eddie Merckx and Fausto Coppi and nobody's going to laugh at you because everybody's doing it. When I was invited to ride the Taster event at Goodwood, which is going to be the Eroica's new home, I decided I was going to think a bit more carefully about my ride. The Goodwood Taster event did one lap of the Goodwood circuit, led by Sir Chris Hoy, and then it headed out into the Goodwood estate, where things got a little bit grippier.
In this Eroica Britannia, you will complete a terrific 20-mile route which includes the strength-sapping Kennel Hill, as featured in the UCI World Championships in 1982. From the lofty position of Goodwood Racecourse, admire sweeping views of the South Downs and the Weald. Descend the private estate road that took members of the royal family to the races before you're out of the saddle again. This time it's the fearsome Festival of Speed hill climb that passes directly in front of Goodwood House. After the steep ascent of Knight's Hill and the long 2.3-mile climb of New Barn Hill, head back to the motor circuit, where a well-deserved cup of tea awaits. Congratulations, you've made history today. And back in the 21st century, for 2022 the Eroica promises a choice of expanded routes, including a 100-miler and some off-road sectors, echoing that original Strade Bianche event.
For the first Eroica in 2014, instead of tracking down my dream bike or channeling my heroes, I bought a really horrible French bike off eBay for 70 quid in a rush. And it had a frame that was made of gas pipe tubing. It actually had derailleurs that were made of plastic. It was just a really dreadful bike that was cheap and nasty when it was new. And then I went and rode the 100-mile route on it, which went over some of the toughest climbs in the Peak District, and it was absolute torture. When I first started working at Cycling Weekly back in 2003, our local bike shop was Geoffrey Butler's in South Croydon. Now this was a really legendary bike shop. Leading frame builders like Charlie Roberts and Cliff Shrub had built frames for Geoffrey Butler's with the Geoffrey Butler name on them. But unlike the Italian bikes, they weren't obvious classics, and so it's relatively easy to track down a good Geoffrey Butler. I found a Geoffrey Butler on eBay which looked pretty good, £300. Okay, it was a bit scruffy. It had its original paint from the late 70s or early 80s with a mixture of Shimano and Campagnolo. From a distance it looked fine. It had a good frame, but when you looked close up there were some serious signs of wear, like bike, like owner. So the frame is steel, it's definitely handmade. It's got really nice spear point lugs here with nice cutouts, probably Nervex. The fork is steel with a Columbus sticker. Actually, the frame doesn't have a sticker at all. It doesn't have a serial number either, which is pretty strange. It would be nice if it was a Cliff Shrub, but I think I'll probably never find out. As for the components, the running gear, as it used to be called, is Campagnolo Grand Sport, which was the mid-range Campagnolo. It'd be nice to have record, but I'm stuck with what I have here. For the gearing, I've got a 52-42 chain set and a 7-speed block on the back, which goes from 13 to 24, which is probably a reasonable spread. The brakes are Shimano 600, which again is mid-range. 600 eventually turned into Ultegra. As for the brake levers, it actually came with some aero brake levers, incredibly, but I sourced some Shimano 600 non-aero levers with the mandatory brake cables looping over the bars. Elsewhere, the wheels are also mid-range. They're probably what you would call training wheels. They're pretty heavy duty with rims made by Alessa, and Shimano 105 hubs, which I think are probably slightly more modern than the rest of the bike. And the pedals are Shimano 600 Tricolor, which is the slightly later version, which was just pre-Ultegra. And they're actually really nice, although they're not quite from the same period as the rest of the bike. They have adjustable toe clips, which is pretty handy, and I think could have been the future of pedals if clipless hadn't come along. And they also have some Alfredo Binder toe straps, which gives them a really nice authentic touch. And I topped it all off with a Brooks B17 saddle, which I get on really well with. I know some people don't, and it's already nicely worn in. As I was saying, there were some serious signs of wear, and the rear derailleur in particular was pretty badly worn. We had to replace the jockey wheels, which were almost smooth, and the bushings had holes in them that were rugby ball shaped rather than football. So, and the chain kept on jamming. We also found that one of the reasons why the chain kept on jamming was because somebody had taken off the rear of the derailleur cage and put it on upside down and back to front. The headset felt really sticky, really horrible. You could really hardly turn the bars actually, and that was because some of the bearings had actually fallen out. The bearing race itself was broken into about 3 pieces. As we expected, the cables were pretty old and worn and rusty, so we replaced cable outers and inners, and at the same time noticed that actually the ferrules, these little ferrules here, it had newer ones rather than the old ones that you need to fit these cable stops, and the same went for the derailleur cable at the back there. So we managed to get some of those on eBay. It runs really nicely now. The good thing about old bikes is that it's possible to track down all these bits, and we probably only spent about 30 quid on getting the bike into a really quite nice running state. A classic bike also has to have proper tyres, and it came with some mismatched modern tyres which really didn't look very nice at all. So I got some Continental Grand Prix 5000s with tan walls, and I think these really make the bike look really nice and classic. They match the hoods, it sets it off really nicely. If you have downtube shifters and only 7 speed, then you've got to be really precise about your gear changes. You've got to make sure that the chain isn't tinkling around the edge of the sprocket or about to jump off the edge, because if it does and you're out of the saddle, honking as it used to be called, you're likely to do yourself a serious mischief. So although the gears need a lot of finesse, really, to precision to get them working properly and to keep yourself safe from harm, ancient brakes don't need that same level. You're best off just grabbing a massive handful of brakes and hoping for the best. It started raining. You can imagine what it was like on these rims and these brakes in the rain going down the other side of Kennel Hill. But in between braking and changing gear, this bike was actually really nice to ride. I really enjoyed riding it on the flat. It's got a lovely ride quality. A hand-built steel frame is nice. It feels great. It feels plush. It's comfortable. The geometry is good on this bike. I really enjoyed riding it. Eroica riders are expected to wear period clothing, and so I wore these leather Dramati shoes that have cleats for toe clips. So they actually go onto the back of the pedal here. You tighten up the toe clip, and it's really dangerous. I wore these Saba woolen shorts, which have a real chamois inside, and as you can imagine, this is nothing like the modern chamois. It's a bit like sitting on a horse without a saddle. Choose your own simile for it, but it's not very nice. I held up the shorts with these braces from Marks & Spencer's, which is what the old riders used to do in the days before bib shorts. Just clip them on and go. For my retro jersey, I chose this vintage woollen Santini, which, as some wag pointed out, the Romanian national champions jersey, and that Ceausescu would be very proud, but I was certain that I wasn't going to be dictating the pace. And finally, I topped it off with this Santini cap, or casquette as they used to be called. You can wear a helmet, but really it doesn't look right unless it's the hairnet type, so I wore this cap. So 2021 was just a taster for the actual Eroica, which is going to be taking place at Goodwood next year. And I'm going to ride this bike for the 100-mile route, and I'm not going to change a thing. Okay, so next to an Italian bike like a Gios Torino or a Colnago Mexico, the bike that Giuseppe Saroni won the 1982 World Championship at Goodwood on, this bike doesn't look like much, but it's a lovely bike. It's made by a British frame builder at a bike shop that I really looked up to when I was a rookie journalist. It's a great bike. If you were at the Eroica event, and if you got yourself a vintage bike and did it up, especially for the ride, then let us know in the comments underneath, and we'd be interested to have a look. If you want to ask me a question about my bike, then leave me a comment underneath, and keep your eyes peeled for our roundup of the best 7 bikes at this year's Eroica. you.